reason for it. They said the reason is it was not a civil war, it was a war for Southern independence. Technically, they're right. I mean, I'm not going to, you know, split hairs with people and fight about terminology, but the fact is, you get back down to it, that's right. It was a war about the Southern states saying, we have a right to pull out of the Union because we don't like what we see happening in Washington. We see the election of a socialistic president. We know what he's going to do. We see the things in process. We see what's going to happen here. We're getting out. Of course, you know, South Carolina, you know, they headed away and got out. They said, we don't like what we see. Well, that's what happened in 1776. We said, we don't like what's going on. We're getting tired of King George. We don't like that. It flew for independence. That's a good cause. I'm an independent Baptist. I understand a few things about independence. Andrew Jackson said this. He's a good Southerner from Tennessee. Let's hear what he had to say. Our government is not to be maintained or our union preserved by invasions of the rights and powers of the several states. Its true strength consists in leaving individuals and states as much as possible to themselves. I believe that. I want the government to stay out of my life. I want them just to leave me alone and let me do my thing. We didn't even have an income tax before the war, Civil War. It was after that thing that this stuff began to happen. We began to have this big centralized government in Washington and all that stuff. I mean, you can't think of, you can't imagine in your mind, Harley, as just a natural American, that it's ever been any other way. But there was a time when there was no centralized, monstrous government coming out of Washington, D.C. There was a time when that wasn't the case. He said that its true strength consists in leaving individuals and states as much as possible to themselves, not in binding the states more closely to the center. And the South said, amen to that. We don't believe in pulling us all in this big super nation together and pulling us all toward Washington and giving all this control and feeding all this money into Washington so we've got this big welfare state created. We don't believe in that. That's not what the Constitution was for. So I'm not going to preach that message again, but that's not what we believed in. And we said, that ain't right, and we're getting out. And we have a right to get out, so we're pulling out. You said, how do you have a right to get out? The very thing that formed this nation, Declaration of Independence. Listen, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, government, you know, what I'm reading right here, some people are so unlearned. I'm not talking about kids. Kids learn as they grow, or should. I'm talking about adults that ought to know this stuff. Are so unlearned, if I just started reading these words, they wouldn't know if I was reading the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, the Magna Carta, the Gettysburg Address. They wouldn't have a clue what I'm reading. I mean, I had somebody ask me the other day, when was the Civil War fought? See, grown person. Grown-ups ought to know this stuff. You ought to know. You ought to know when it's fought. You ought to understand these things. I mean, you don't have to be a history buff, I mean, to know that. There are certain basics you ought to know. And the person asked me this was like, I don't know the exact, over 50, none of you, over 50. A man over 50 in the South didn't know when the Civil War was fought. Like I said, our heritage is just vanishing. It's going away. Well, let me go ahead for what I was doing before I interrupted myself. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Now watch this. Deriving their just powers. This is the key, man. This is it. This is the whole summation of why the Civil War got started right here. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. No government has a right to set itself up and say, we are your government. The Declaration of Independence says no. The people will decide what kind of government they want, and if they don't like the government that's in charge, they'll start another one. Let me keep reading. That whenever any form of government, did Lincoln have a form of government? Wouldn't that qualify as a form of government? What Lincoln set up in Washington under his administration? Yeah. Any form of government becomes destructive of these ends. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Would the people, would you say the southern states consisted of people? I would. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. That's exactly what we did. We said we're going to get a new government, a new constitution, a new president, Jefferson Davis. We've got a new constitution. Here it is. We've got our own thing going now. Y'all leave us alone. We don't like what you're doing. Based on the Declaration of Independence and what this nation stands for, we're pulling out. Because we see you are a train headed for derail. And we don't want to derail with you. We're getting out. But that's exactly what happened. You said it's not that simple. It is that simple. It's not that simple if you start adding a bunch of irrelevant things and pretending that slavery was the issue when it wasn't the issue until 2 years after the war got started, and Lincoln seen that he could make it an issue. It became an issue then. It wasn't an issue when it started. To abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them, not anybody else, them, the people who choose to have a new government, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. That's the Declaration of Independence. That's what that flag stands for. They said, we got us a new flag, not because we disagree with that flag, but because you people who profess to believe in that flag don't believe in that flag. You've changed what that flag stands for. You have corrupted it, just like many have corrupted this flag today. You are not standing for true freedom anymore. You are taking this country in the wrong direction, and we want to get back to what we had to start with. That's the whole thing right there. So it was a good cause. Think of the good cause for which it flew. You don't have to think of anything else. You can't remember anything else about the Confederate flag. Just remember one thing. The people who flew that flag said, what the northern states are doing is not right. And we're not going along with it. We're going to get back to their... I mean, tell me this. How come one-third of the West Point graduates signed out of the Union to fight for the southern states? Isn't that something? I mean, you say, well, the Civil War is just a bunch of country hicks. West Point graduates are not country hicks. Just a bunch of hicks out there in the woods. They don't know anything. They're unlearned. They don't understand the law. They don't realize that they were in the wrong. 1/3 of the West Point graduates said, we're for the South. Those are educated men who knew the law, knew the Constitution, said, we're for the South. Robert E. Lee said, I'm for the South. He said, I'm not for everything that goes on in the South, but bless God, I'm not fighting against my homeland and for what we stood for. And he was in the Union Army. He resigned. Said, I'm staying for my state of Virginia. I'm staying home and defending my land. Any moral person would, any right person would. I read of a case the other day where they had numerous people in the Civil War that were from other nations that came here and enlisted on both sides, actually. And one of them enlisted on the Union side, and after just a short time went by there, he ran away, ran to the South. They said, where are you going? You afraid to fight? He said, no, I'm not afraid to fight. I just want to fight for the right cause. he just left the North and came down here to fight. Amen. Think of the good cause for which it flew. Number 2, you see the Confederate flag? Think of the brave men. Think of the brave men who fought for it. Think of them. Think of those fellows. The many brave, I can't, give you just many cases. It'll be all day if we just try to tell all those, but you get to reading a little bit. You don't have to read very long at all to find bravery. Just every time you turn a page in the Civil War, somebody with an act of bravery. You say, why was they so brave and so courageous? Why did they just put their life on the line so much? I mean, why do that? Because the Civil War it was not a war fought in Iraq or Iran. It's not a war where Americans went some other place. It was a war where Southerners were fighting oftentimes right in their own neighborhoods, right in their own areas. I read of a case of the day where one general, a battle was going on. His home was like, he could see his house where he was raised up at as a boy, just right in the foreground or the background, however it's positioned there, right there. Well, if somebody's trying to take over your family farm and take over your land and take over the way you do things and trying to burn your cotton and trying to burn your barns and take your family members and ship them off to different places, wouldn't you fight? Wouldn't you stand up and fight? And that produced brave men who honestly said, truly, not just because they were great soldiers, but they were just great men. They said, I'd rather die than give up my land. I was brave. I'd do that. If that bunch come in right now and said, we're going to take over Tennessee, and we're going to make Tennessee just like liberal California. I said, where's my gun? You're not going to do that. No, you have to take me down in the process. You won't do it with me living. I would do that. I'm just that way. I mean, you love your land, you love your way of life. Look, if you don't, go find some place you do love. Why live somewhere if you don't like the way it is? I can imagine that. And I don't think God put somebody there like that. I hear these missionaries talking about they've developed a love for the country they're in. They go there. I love that. They go there and they develop a love for the people, a love for the culture. And we can't hardly, hear Linton Smith talking about China and all the weird things they eat over there. We can't get that, But he gets it because that's where God put him. See? He's learned to love those people. He can't wait to get back. You've heard missionaries, I can't wait to get back to my home. This is your home, not anymore. God's given me a new home. See? That's where he likes it. Well, that's we had one just a while back, gonna raise his kids in Greece. Remember that thing? I thought, wow, that's his home. That's where God put him. Nothing wrong with loving your home. Nothing wrong with defending your home. Nothing wrong with being brave and standing up for your home. Tony told me a case the other day where he had read or heard, I guess he'd read this, that Stonewall Jackson was actually sitting on his particular soldiers at that moment were not actually engaged in battle. It was kind of a temporary timeout or something. And he was actually sitting on a stump reading his Bible. Is that what you told me? Sitting there reading a book, just reading a book about the Bible, sitting there. Bullets were just flying this way and that way, coming and going for different things. And somebody said something to him about, man, you're going to get shot out there. You're going to get shot. And he made some comment to the effect, well, I'll be here until God's ready for me to go, and until then I'll be safe. And if how do you say it? I'm not useful. I'm not useful if. Remember how that went? I've been went blank. He said, as long as I'm useful, God's going to protect me, something like that. If I'm not useful, God doesn't need me anyway. Who needs me anyway? Something like that. He's just sitting there not worrying about it, just trusting God. Right? The bullets flying everywhere. Man, I read that thing other day, and I bought a picture about it, and I got so inspired, I went and bought me a picture about it. At Bedford Forest, his escape from Fort Donelson. They were 15,000 Union soldiers surrounding that place, and basically he was told by higher command that he was going to have to surrender. We have